of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity. You know, Mr. I'm Possible started out with, quite frankly, impossible circumstances. During my childhood and adolescence, I was labeled special ed. I was labeled at risk, and I was labeled as one who should be possibly a menace to society. But I did have family members and counselors and teachers and mentors and others who helped take me from impossible to I'm possible. And ironically, I was labeled special ed because they said I talked too much. And I wanted to give all of the answers. And ironically, that is why I travel the globe now as a world-class speaker, because I talk too much. I bring solutions, and I bring positive results to communities across the world, especially those that are underrepresented.
So, where did you grow up? Let's start there. Just give everybody a little.
You know what? I am proud to say I grew up in Jamaica, Queens, New York. And so I'm a New Yorker at heart. And I spent my summers in the South in Savannah, Georgia. And so I do claim Savannah, Georgia and Jamaica, New York, that north-south transition that was so important to my cultural upbringing, so important to my purpose as it stands now. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can imagine that was two very different environments, but like you said, two places that really needed someone who talks too much and who has solutions and who wants to bring others up with them. So
Absolutely.
after you said you had some mentors and some family members that kind of helped you move along in the direction that you wanted to. Talk a little bit about how that got started and how you became a beacon of light.
Well, here's the story that is so, I would say, profound in my own life, because the journey that I took is the same journey that I'm helping others to take across the world. I'm talking about youth and families in general, but in particular, young Black males and young men of color. And so that is my work as Mr. I'm Possible. And I did not give myself that moniker, that name. That name was bestowed upon me by youth in the Sickle Cell Foundation of Georgia. I lost a brother to sickle cell anemia, so I'm very passionate about that. I've lost a sister to the AIDS virus, very passionate about that. I have a mom who's battling Alzheimer's today, very passionate about that. And so the young people gave me the name Mr. I'm Possible, because I used to always tell them, I said, the difference between impossible and I'm possible is the apostrophe. And when you take that apostrophe and you put it between the I and the M, then impossible becomes I'm possible. So the little things count. And so they started calling me Mr. I'm Possible and Uncle Keith. And so those are the two names that I'm known by globally. And so that is the work that I do on a daily basis. And to be quite frank with you, the core of my work, I am fighting for the humanity of young men of color. I am fighting for the humanity of young men of color. And people often ask, what does that mean? Well, here in America, young men of color have been oppressed, suppressed, repressed, and that has left so many of them depressed. And so I'm fighting for humanity. I'm talking about something as small as their social emotional learning. Many of the young Black males that I work with, the young men of color, whether it be in the MBK, My Brother's Keeper organization, the Black Man Can organization, and so many other organizations, the narrative that they have in their minds is real men don't cry. And so for millions of young men of color that I serve around the world, that is a great part of their humanity stripped. They are dehumanized. And so now they cannot cry, they cannot feel. And imagine walking around in a world where your existence is filled with being numb and you cannot express yourself. And when your humanity is being kept in bondage, how do you break free? Often you break free through negative expressions. And so that's why you see so many young men of color that are in the penal institutions and juvenile detention centers. And so it is my goal to change the narrative. It is my goal to take them from impossible to I'm possible. It is my goal to build prospects, not suspects. And so every day I am fighting for the basic humanity of young men of color across the world. Young men of color are told they cannot shed those tears. And so when I'm at platforms like I was recently at the My Brother's Keeper Symposium sponsored by the New York State Department of Education, and when I was done, and countless numbers of young men, they hugged me and I hugged them, and they cried. And some of them had said that they haven't cried in years. And I'm talking about, this is basic human emotions. These are basic human emotions that they cannot express. They are taught that in their own communities. They see that in the system. They see that on a daily basis. And so now they walk around and they're not whole because everyone else gets an opportunity to express themselves. Everyone gets an opportunity to be human. And so when I say I'm fighting for their humanity and their social emotional learning, it is so very important, because before they can excel academically, before we can get to their heads, we have to tap into their hearts. And so many of these young men, the majority of them, these are good kids. These are good kids. These are great kids with great ideas. They have hopes, they have dreams, and they don't deserve to have those hopes and dreams suppressed at such an early age. You know, I'm going into communities where I'm telling individuals in communities, if your son is 8 or 10 years old, don't make him the man of the house. There's no way he can be the man of the house because he's 8 years old, he's 10 years old. And quite often, not only do they see that in their own communities, we see the adultification of young men of color in society. Here you are, and you have sons. And so my son at 16 was a young man, but he was viewed as a man. Okay, he was viewed as a man by the system and in society. That is the adultification of young men of color, and we have to get rid of that. We have to let these young boys experience life. Be boys. Let them be boys. Let them be young men. Let them grow into the promise that they were created to be. And that's what My Brother's Keeper is all about. That's what changing the narrative is all about. That's what Keith L. Brown, Mr. Impossible, Uncle Keith, is all about. Helping them to understand this. My role is this: we motivate, we elevate, we educate, they graduate, and they accelerate. So once again, we motivate, we elevate, we educate, they graduate, and then hopefully they will accelerate. And so my role is to stop the hate. That's my role.
My Brother's Keeper, you know, I'm sure there are different programs similar to that throughout the country and hopefully the world. But My Brother's Keeper is unique to New York, and I think that's really special for us. So talk a little bit about what you've seen, you know, through this program, the boys you've spoken to on Thursday, and just kind of the work that you've seen come out of this.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I must salute President Obama, because it is the brainchild of President Obama that was born out of the murder of Trayvon Martin. And it was at that time when President Obama said, if I had a son, most likely he would look like Trayvon. And after that, the then president took action in creating My Brother's Keeper, a safe space where young men of color could grow and reach their full potential, and where they could be loved and nurtured. And so my work with MBK, not only in the great state of New York, but across the country, is so special to me, because MBK builds scholars, not just students. And the difference is anyone can be a student. It doesn't take any effort to be a student. As a matter of fact, you don't even earn the title of student. You're classified.
So you're given that.
You're given that, but you earn the title of scholar. And in the My Brother's Keeper program, they have the title fellows. And a fellow is someone who's a scholar, a servant leader, and someone who has the promise to excel and not only be successful, but significant. And when those young men walk in with their suits and ties on, and like I say, they walk in suited and booted, or they walk in with those cardigans and they walk in with that MBK insignia, automatically you see the posture rise. You see the heads go up.
Oh yeah,
and
they are proud.
Oh, there's a sense of pride. And here's the key. That sense of pride is transferable. It is a tangible trait that they have, and it's exemplified in schools and in their communities. So when they are in the MBK program, academic excellence rises. Their aspirations rise. Now they're talking about college and career readiness. Now they're more intentional about their futures. So that's what MBK does. MBK gives them the hope that they might not otherwise see. And it also elevates them to a level that they deserve to be on. And MBK changes the narrative. And so when you see a group of young men of color, you can no longer have trepidation, okay? All right, or be afraid of their presence. But then you see the greatness that is not only in them, but youth of all colors, all races, and all ethnicities in America. And truly, that's what we should be about. But because it is not often offered to young men of color,
it's not here.
It's not. We must fight harder for that equity. We must fight harder, not just for the equality, but for the equity. And so that's what MBK does. And that is my work. And that's why I'm so honored. And guess what? This is not a job for me, okay? This is not a career. This is my assignment. This is my calling. And so I'm going to be obedient to it.
The one thing you mentioned it a few times, but I want to touch on that, the idea of equity and why it's so important to have programs like this, because there is an imbalance, and whether it's acknowledged in all areas, it's not balanced. So I think sometimes people miss that mark and think, oh, why is this special program only for, this race or this ethnicity or this group?
Yes.
Why can't we promote, like you just said, youth of all? It's because all of the youth are not treated the same.
Oh, and that is the reality that we face. I believe that young men of color and young men of color in general, in particular, and all Black youth will be able to excel when they have two things: access and exposure. Okay. See, access and exposure. Exposure meaning that they need to get out of the environments and where they live and be able to see other parts of the state, other parts of the country, other parts of the world. The MBK fellows from Westbury, for example, Westbury School District, they were able to travel to Ghana. Can you imagine that they were able to travel on a global level? And guess what? Their lives are forever changed now because of the fact that they realize and understand that there's a difference between a bus pass and a passport. See, a bus pass will keep you local and take you in your local surroundings, but the passport will take you global. That experience along through My Brother's Keeper expanded their minds and their hearts and their spirits. And so that's so very important. So they have to have that exposure. Then they have to have access. Your sons deserve access to those resources. My son deserved that. The young men of color in MBK and young men of color across the world, they deserve access. What does that look like? Funding. They have to have that funding that will help them become sharpened. Just like the pencil, I often say, the pencil works best when it's sharpened. Well, guess what? If our young men of color are not sharpened with access and exposure, if they're not sharpened, nobody will ever get their point. And we know a dull point doesn't work. And so access and exposure are both very important. And that's why equity is very important. No, it doesn't mean that only they matter. It means that they matter too. Okay.
Yeah, like, but you have to, they weren't included in the all matter. So
absolutely. So they matter too. And you will find that when young men of color receive access and exposure and the resources that they deserve, and when marginalized school districts get the resources they deserve, then we become a better America. See, that's the key. We become a better America. We don't become an isolated America or divided America, but we have a better America when all of the youth that I serve, because I serve all youth. So when all of them have access and exposure and equity becomes real, not just a cliche, then we will have a better America. And when we have a better America, that will spread throughout the globe.
I've seen the work that you do, so you're definitely making a difference. But I can imagine that it gets disheartening sometimes, I'm sure. But
Yes.
how do you keep going, and what's your motivation to continue this assignment?
Well, first of all, as a man of faith, I have a strong belief in God, and that is my sustaining point. That is my foundation. I also have a lovely, supportive wife who is a director and a lead of teacher development here in a local school district here in the great state of Georgia. My wife has served from everything from a teacher to an assistant principal, a principal, teacher development specialist, and now in her current role. So she's a child and youth advocate as well. So that helps.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times we do the work together.
Mhm.
My son is employed, okay, with Key Point Alliance that works with underrepresented youth as well, helping them to access and exposure and to go to college. So you could say that we are a family of servant leaders. We are a family of advocacy. We are a family of equity, and that helps. But here's something that I would like to share with all of your viewers and listeners as well. I have a therapist that keeps me grounded. My wife and I have a therapist. My son, we have a family therapist. My wife and I have done the counseling. We've done the marriage counseling as a family because we realize the same ills in society. We face those in our own home. We face those in our own family. And so, yes, we are a praying family, but we understand that therapy matters. And so mental health matters. And the mental health of the young men of color that I serve, it matters. And so when you ask, how do I stay grounded? I stay grounded through prayer. I stay grounded through meditation. I stay grounded through self-care and what I call self-eye care. But I also stay grounded because of therapy, because of getting the help that I deserve. And watch this, removing the stigma that something is wrong when you get therapy. So all of those things help me grounded because you know what? At the end of the day, I'm tired of speaking at more young men of color's funerals than graduations. I'm tired of being a pallbearer when I was called to be an armor bearer. I'm tired of young men of color committing death by suicide because they did not have the love, support, and access and exposure that they deserved, and they didn't see a way out. And so that's what Mr. Impossible has been called to be, a solution. I'm nothing else but a solution. If I don't connect, then my words mean nothing. If I don't know how to engage and impact and influence and change their hearts and bring light to them, if I'm not bringing light, I'm bringing darkness. And that's what we as adults have to understand, that at this point, we can no longer say to our young people, don't do as I do as I say. Oh no, because out of fear, right? Out of fear, they will do as you say, but out of your example, they will do as you do. And so I want to set that example. Yes, people say, how do you engage them? You're older, you got the silver beard. This is my COVID beard. How do you do that? Because I understand it's about connection. It's about being on their level and bringing them to mine. But when you tap into young people and their energy and their innovation and their ideas, then your life changes as well. So I am one who is a connector, who will engage, who will always, always listen to them. As adults, we have to be more interested and less interesting. And so that's what Mr. Impossible is about. And that's why I'm so effective with the young people that I serve across the world.
All right. In our last few minutes, that's probably a good segue to one of your favorite stories. Share with me a very impactful moment or something that really has stuck with you. I'm sure you have hundreds, but something that really stands out to you and sticks with you.
Wow. there have been a plethora of stories. I'm talking about thousands of stories through the years. But if one really stands out, I will stay with the My Brother's Keeper theme. I will stay there with that theme. On last year, when I spoke at MBK 2023, at the closing of my keynote, a young man of color just walked to the stage. I mean, I didn't have Secret Service there or anything like that, right? And as they were about to come and, just, I guess, to have him to sit down, I motioned, no, let him come. And he came up to me and he gave me a hug and he said, thank you. And immediately the tears started to flow and I could not stop the tears. And there were other young men in the audience who said, it's all right, Uncle Keith, you can cry. You taught us to cry. And I mean, I boohoo cried.
I was going to say, I'm sure that made it go more.
Oh, listen, nothing like that has ever happened to me since, and it might not happen to me again. But what happened next was life-changing. Hundreds of young men started coming to the stage, and they circled me, and I was in the middle and each other, and they hugged each other, and we cried together. And there were so many tears that were hitting the floor on that day. And I believe those tears that hit the stage actually created a new birth for all of those young men. And many of them send me DMs in my Instagram today, in my TikTok today. And that's the positive part about social media. And they tell me about their lives and we are connected now. And that moment forever changed my life because I realized in that very moment that those teenagers who were crying with me, there was a teenager on the inside of me that had some tears that needed to come out as well. And so when you talk about a life-changing moment, it happened at New York State MBK 2023, where hundreds of young men flooded the stage. They held me and we cried together. And here is the powerful part about it. I hold many of them every day, millions across the globe. And on that day, hundreds held me. And so as adults, if we will just hold on to our young men of color, guess what? They will hold us up. They will hold America up. They will hold the world up. I will never forget that moment. It was a moment that changed my life and theirs.
Oh, yes, I'm sure. Well, now that I'm fully sobbing.
Excellent. And well, as we say, GOODJOB, good job, good job. Yes.
Well, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you would like to talk about, Keith? I appreciate this so much.
Oh, no, I appreciate you. And let me say, I appreciate you and the great work that you do. I appreciate Channel 6 out of Albany. I appreciate the work that Channel 6 does and showing up for those events that matter to the community, not only in Albany, not only in the great state of New York, but throughout the nation and throughout the world. So shout out to Channel 6 for excellent coverage. Excellent coverage. Thank you so much.
I'm definitely proud to be a part of this team.
Oh, absolutely. And as a mass communications major that worked at WTOC in Savannah, Georgia, also a CBS affiliate, thank you so very much because our work matters. I also would like to say, listen, as an author, my latest book is Talk is Expensive. Okay. And I know all of our lives we've heard that talk is cheap. But when we speak life into our young men of color, it's expensive because they get to be and have an opportunity to be what they were called to be. And then when we speak negatively into the lives of our young people and each other, it's also expensive because many of us are in a state of hopelessness because of the negative talk over our lives. So talk has never been cheap. It has always been expensive. And I think that is very important. So that is my latest book, Talk is Expensive. And that's what I do. That's what I do. And here's the thing. Most people say, well, what I do is not who I am. No, what I do is who I am. Absolutely. What I do is who I am. So I'm grateful for this opportunity today. And I can promise that as long as I'm spared life, that I will continue to have the nerve to serve and feed the need to lead, not only across the world, but right here in the Metro Atlanta area where I work with the